Hi, I'm Keith Hernandez, and you're listening to The Changeup, where each episode we talk to somebody who's left the corporate world to start their own thing. This week, we're excited to welcome Rajiv Satyal. Rajiv is a former Procter & Gamble marketing executive turned actor comedian. We learn about the little-known MP3 player that was the final drive for him to make the big leap, and we also talk about joke construction during the pandemic. It's a fun conversation, and I hope you enjoy. This week, I have actor-comedian Rajiv Satyal. Rajiv, thank you so much. It's exciting to reconnect and talk a little bit. How are you?
I'm grateful for your having me on. Thanks for having me, Keith.
Awesome. So yeah, every episode I talk to somebody who has decided to take the plunge and change their careers and transition. Normally, it's somebody who's decided to take big VC funding and go out there and build a new company to compete with what they used to work with. Very rare is it somebody that has gone from the corporate world into the comedy world. Walk me through a little bit of how and why this happened.
You know, it's been 15 years, which is incredible to say. I think that every amount of time probably sounds sizable in that moment when you go, wow, I can't believe it's been a year. I can't believe it's been 5 years. 10 years is definitely a thing, but I think 15 really feels like in any field, somebody's an expert at that point, or just probably will not become an expert. They're just not good at their job. But at that point, they probably filtered out or fallen out, right? So you're catching me at a really interesting time, Keith, because the idea of going, I spent 30 years in Ohio, 15 years in California. That's how old I am, 45. And you go, wow, that is a significant milestone. I did it because I wanted to do a job that I felt only I could do. So obviously there are other comedians out there and other actors out there naturally, but I do it differently. Whereas in corporate America, there's a little bit of room for creativity. I'm not saying there's none, but at the end of the day, and I don't mean this insultingly, you're a cog in a wheel. What I mean by that is there's a strategy that's been aligned upon, and we all need to march and go do this. So to some extent, the die is cast. And I felt like, well, another smart person, not an idiot, but a smart person in my shoes could probably do just about as good of a job as I did. And that kind of bumped me as a creative.
So was there a particular moment that you were sitting there either at your cubicle or inside of a meeting where you said, you know what, F this, I'm out. This is my last day here and I'm going to give this a shot?
Yeah, it was working on the Dell Ditty. Oh my gosh, I still have the paraphernalia for this. So I was at Procter & Gamble, P&G, the Peach, as I call it. And I worked at Tremor for the last 2 years of my 6 years at P&G. And it was a word of mouth agency. And we had internal and external clients. So internal clients like Herbal Essences, external clients like Microsoft, Dell, Coca-Cola. And we had one for Dell. They had released the Ditty, which was competing against the iPod at the time. And
okay,
I thought the product
did really well.
Yeah, exactly. If I have to explain it, that's like having to explain a joke. Obviously, it didn't work. So
right above or below the Zune? Because wasn't the Zune out?
It was right around that time. It's funny that you mentioned the Zune because that was Microsoft, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so
I was at Microsoft when the Zune came out. So.
Oh wow, you were there for that very short period of time, and I think you were at Microsoft for longer than that. But that was a short burst of energy, I guess.
Yeah. So sorry. You remember the Ditty and the Zune and
yes, I remember all of that stuff.
iPod. We didn't know which one was going to win. The MP3 war.
We didn't know what was going to win. And I actually was just watching The Shop, hosted by LeBron James, and Jay-Z told a story about DMX. Rest in peace. If anybody wants to go listen to it or watch it on YouTube, it's amazing. It's if you just YouTube or Google Jay-Z DMX story. He talks about how they were neck and neck for a long time, and rest in peace DMX. But you just to think that they were like Ja Rule or some of these people, you look back and like, really? Yes. If you were in 1998, 99, you didn't know who was going to win, and it seems mind-blowing to say now, but it's just true. And so Microsoft had partnered. It's funny, Keith, that you bring up Microsoft because they had partnered with Dell to take on Apple and the iPod and the onslaught of the empire and all of that stuff. And I kind of thought the Ditty was BS. I learned about the specs. I was like, this product is garbage. And I have a hard time selling things in which I do not believe. If I believe in it, I will sell it like the Dickens, if that's the phrase. But I really felt like, whoa, this thing is a pile of junk. And the program that we did for it, we were supposed to sell maybe about 200 or 300 of them in this test program. We sold 2.
Oh, man.
And I remember my management trying to put a good spin on it. And God bless them, I was never asked to do anything unethical, including this. P&G is really, really rock solid in terms of its ethics and morality. And even then, they didn't ask me to do anything untoward. But my belief in what we did at Tremor was shot. And I was going, you know what, man? I just can't do this. I can't hawk stuff that I feel is not real because the other stuff worked. Tide really is better. Charmin really is better. I
Yeah.
believe in that. But the thing that I was working on, I was going, you know what? But I'm not the kind of person, with an engineering background that I was going to leave the next day. But that was the moment where I started to put in place my plan to get out within about a year. And I think that's the first time I've ever told that story. So there you go.
Oh, cool. Nice. You just touched on your engineering background, and I think that's also fascinating because you studied engineering before getting into the business world. So you had a little bit of this career transition right away. Walk me through that. Walk me through, how does an engineer go? How does somebody who's engineer, we tend to look at and go introvert, process driven, and especially where you were on the business side, where you're brand management and creative. How does somebody kind of study that and then end up on the business side?
It's interesting. At the time, I didn't really see it as massive a leap, and certainly compared to leaving to go into comedy, it isn't. But it is. It is a big change. It is a big transition because all the stuff I studied, fluid mechanics and thermodynamics and all of the other things, sort of went out the window. But there were people at the Page who really admired engineers, who just felt like, well, you are process driven. You may not be able to write, although I could, but you can certainly express yourself on paper because a lot of the time, like you're saying, the culture is really introverted for engineering. And I think that sort of deduction ability, clearly you can read graphs and charts and all that stuff. I always tell people that to major in engineering or something really hard like that if you can do it. Like if you are even a little bit drawn to it, I would get the degree because it commands so much respect in a room. Just the fact that you've gotten an engineering degree. I'm not saying do it for the ego, although why not? But it's more of just like, anything after that is going to seem easy. I remember sitting in, Keith, on a couple of MBA classes. I went to Harvard to sit in on a class, UCLA, USC, all these places. And I remember sitting at Harvard and the professor put a problem on the board. And I think I was the only one who got it right. And I'm like, well, why am I going to spend $250,000 to get an education here when I'm the only person getting this stuff right? And I would just going, this to me just seemed really easy. And it is in comparison to engineering. It is easy. I just think the thing that business people tend to have that maybe engineers don't, and this is a real thing, I'm not just giving them crumbs here after what I said just now, it's the ability to really analyze money, to really look at a decision and go, here's how we are going to handle this. And that's what business is really the transfer of money. So I think to have that instinct, I have two brothers and one of them just doesn't have that. He's worked in the business world for a while, but he goes, that does not come easy to me. And the creative side comes much easier to him.
And so he's on the creative side and
Both. He's an editor and he leans much more into the creative side than the business side. And he has to have more support to do the business side. He's the first person to admit that. So he's great at it because he works harder at it. It's not like he's not good at his job. He's really good at his job, but it's hard for him. And he's like, dude, the creative side is just so much more easy for me to do.
it's great to find those strengths, right? I think so often people don't go towards their strengths and kind of get stuck in this is what I was supposed to do, or this is the path that I chose for myself, and here's how I'm going to do it. Now, when you just mentioned, you got your degree in engineering, got a master's degree on the business side. Were there people, when you made this decision, were there people in your life who said, you're throwing this all away? Or was it a supportive group that kind of knew this was your destiny?
It was more the latter, but it needs to be earned. And I had done a show where I talked about the difference between supporters and believers. And, the beginning, your loved ones and your friends are going to support you. They are going to want to see you make this leap, perhaps live vicariously, be there in case you do make it big and get in on the ground floor. And hey,
Yeah.
it's really cool. Let's just see what happens. And I don't know that I'd ever really thought about it until just now. So maybe you're a really good interviewer, Keith. But just the idea of unlocking, hey, do they have your best interests at heart? And making sure you really ask that question. And I did. I sat down with a lot of people, and you have to ask point blank, am I making a really big mistake? Like, all kidding aside, this is my life. What do you think? And of
Yeah.
course, your friends and your loved ones are going to give you the really, if you ask it that way. And I feel like you do have to ask it that way multiple times before people will really tell you. And over time, you could see it happen in their eyes where they went from supporters to believers. You'd step
Yeah,
off
I love
stage and they'd look at you and go, you're good at this.
that.
And that's what you're hoping for, is not just the idea of it, but whoa, the execution. You can stand on a stage. I know you talked about doing it, and we've heard you talk about how excited you are. But honestly, we came and we were nervous. We didn't know if you were actually going to be able to do the job. And of course, it's hard. So why would they
Yep.
think you could do it? And when they saw that, I think it is more the latter, that they were supportive, but then they became believers. And that's really on you to convert them.
I love that. Yeah, and I think it's a real hard conversation and a real talk to go to find those people who are going to go, I think you're not ready for this, or those are the people you hold on to. I remember when I left the corporate world and started my own company, I did have a couple friends that said, "That's a lot of money you're giving up. That's weird."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "Yeah, okay, you're right." And some of them were just like, "I just don't get it," but okay, good luck. I'll support you. And I love
Mm-hmm.
that part of
Mm-hmm.
that. So you made this transition. Was there a point that you knew you were funny, either post P&G or even when you were a kid, that that you yourself knew, okay, this, I'm funny and I can make something with this?
There are a lot of moments like that where I went, wow, I know I'm funny. And I've talked a lot about that, but the specific inflection point of, can you do this as a job? Because
Yeah,
being funny is a talent, and then doing stand up is a skill, right? You could have timing, and that's what you need. It's just like rhythm to a dancer. You could be a really good dancer without having rhythm, but you're going to have to learn how to count. It's probably written, though, that you're not going to be a great dancer if you don't have rhythm. And that's probably
yeah,
fairly universally accepted. I think with comedy, it's the same thing of having timing. You need to have that ability to know when to surf that wave. And I think it's something I assumed everybody had, even though I knew I was funny and probably often the funniest person in the room, if not close. I didn't think about the fact that I had something that other people didn't. And that seems sort of weird to say because people were always telling you
mhm,
you're funny. But yeah, what can I do with it? Well, you could be a stand up comic, but not everybody I knew who was funny could be a stand up comic. And a lot of actually, the funniest people I know are not stand up comics.
yeah,
And my friend John Sandy is the funniest person I've ever met, but he freely admits, he's like, I can't get up there and just create something out of nothing. He could just bust on people in a room. He can roll with it at a party, when everybody's drinking beers,
yeah.
and he can be the funniest guy there, and funnier than I am by a mile. But if you give him a mic under the lights, he freely admits, he's like, I can't do that. So I think the idea of being able to get on stage, realize that you had a great night. I think it's the nights where nobody else does well and you're the first one to break open the room. If
Yeah.
you're doing that consistently, not just once, but consistently, where wow, it doesn't really look like anybody can get anything out of this room. And you are the one that cracks it open. And then everybody has a good set after you, or they don't. But you were the first one to crack that room. I think that's the thing for which you're looking.
And is that discipline? Is that understanding joke construction? What is it that differentiates somebody to have that awareness? Because that does sound like, court awareness, like a really good point guard sees the whole room and starting to kind of break down different things in different plays that way.
I think to some extent it is looking at the comics who came before you and seeing what's working and what's not. Your set is your set, and that's why it's called a set or a routine. That said, there is flexibility in that. You can look at your act as all of these hunks, and you can look at you can look at your act as all of these hunks and go, okay, they laughed at that. So that means maybe these next 7 or 8, they're going to like when I talk about this.
Yeah.
Ooh, it didn't really seem like they were into that. Maybe I'm going to cut that out. And that's where the engineering part comes in, the business part comes in, all the stuff that you've learned, the social side of you comes to the table and comes to the stage quite literally. And you're able to slice and dice that room and go, okay, I think I should lead with this. It seems like that's where their energy is. And that's just having that sense. I think that it is a talent, but it's a skill, like I'm saying, if you work on it. But I think, like you're saying, it's that point guard awareness. It's just being able to be comfortable in a comedy club. Because it's funny the way you just said that. Some people are comfortable on a court or in a court or on a factory floor or in an office or on a set. Where do you feel comfortable? Where do you feel like, oh, this is where I can really make my move? And I remember going to a lot of clubs in my early 20s, and my friend Grant put his arm around me and he goes, I don't really understand why you come to clubs. You can't dance. And at the time, I really was pretty terrible. I'm actually pretty good now, but I was really crappy. And he goes, I've seen you talk to women at the bar. You're so funny. He's like, why aren't you going to bars and talking to women there? Because you're so funny. Like, you get on the dance floor and you lose them. Like, you go to bars, you're going to kill. And I thought that was such an insightful comment of just knowing where you feel comfortable. Is it a coffee shop? Is it wherever it is? Even if you're making a business pitch, where do you want to be when you're making this pitch? Find a place that's comfortable to you.
Yeah, I love that so much. I was just talking to someone right before we got on who has such a great idea, such a great concept, but they want to do it in 5 to 7 years. And I asked why that's specific, but also so vague and so far off. When you, what would you say to somebody who says, I want to be in comedy, but I don't want to do it yet? Would you give them advice to just get on that stage and go, or is there some sort of mental toughness, mental preparedness that you do think somebody needs before they're actually ready to go on the stage?
It really depends upon what is driving that decision. So if you were to say, hey, I just had my second kid and I know from the first one, I'm just sunk for the next 2 to 3 years. And by the time they get into soccer and you've got your reasons, then, hey, those are personal reasons and that's fine. I guess if you had some creative plan where I remember a long time ago, I said, I want to have a business career, then an entertainment career, then a politics career. And I had laid all of that out 15 years ago. I don't know if I'll still follow through with that, but a friend of mine pointed that out. And I'm actually hanging out with her very soon again. She goes, your plan is still sort of unfolding in that direction if you want it to.
Yeah.
I think if the person goes, look, I want to get good at writing and I want to, maybe take an improv class and maybe I want to open up socially more and do some of those Tim Ferriss exercises of just getting comfortable in my own body. And I want to meditate and just all those things and maybe get ready. But I would almost say, yes, start now. And that should all be part of what you talk about.
Yeah.
I think that'd be great to say, hey, I started just like in gym class and I could do 20 sit-ups and it's the Montessori method. At the end, you do 50 and you were judged on that delta. Hey, record that first set. And then go do all these other things that you feel like every year I got up and I got better, or maybe I got worse and I regressed or whatever. But I don't think there's any harm in getting up and trying to do 5 at a local open mic and just getting it on tape or not, just having it done and under your belt.
Do you remember your first set?
Yeah, because it's on tape. My dad
Cool.
recorded it and it's on nice. My website, I believe, funnyindian.com. It's certainly on my YouTube and I remember it and I don't have to remember it because it lives on YouTube and on my website, but I would have remembered it. Yeah, I invited everybody I know to watch me do something I had never done before. And that's me. I'm an extrovert.
Was it in Cincinnati?
I enjoyed it. Yeah, it was at Go Bananas Comedy Club in Cincinnati, Ohio. It was a contest. And I brought about 60 people. It was a packed room, but that's how I like to do it. I like to fail big or succeed big. And I feel like I'll just rise to the moment. I'm just going to go for it. And I'm going to try to do this thing. And if I fail, it'll be funny, although it probably wouldn't have been, honestly, in retrospect. So I don't know. I think that there are the people who want to do it more on the sly and maybe just sign up at a local open mic and don't tell anybody. Just go do it and get it out of the way. To me, that wasn't the way to do it. I want to go big, but I understand.
You wanted everybody there to see it. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Why not? I'll rise to the occasion.
That's amazing. Describe the evolution of your jokes. And, it's amazing that you have that first moment on tape. Do you ever look back on that and some of the earlier jokes and cringe, or you look at that as a process that's always evolving and helping you mature into who you are now?
I think it is a process. I've always been wary of anyone's looking back on themselves at an earlier age and being like, I was such an idiot. I'm like, well, I don't know if you were an idiot. It's a development. It's a process. I mean, maybe you were, but I think you knew what a 14-year-old knew. I think you knew what a 23-year-old knew. I think that is part of the game. And so I also probably think you weren't an idiot. If you were well thought out, you just were maybe more talkative or you didn't know how to do certain things yet and all that. I think for that first set, there were a lot of the elements already there.
Yeah, so I actually was surprised by how maybe not fully formed I was, but that the elements were there. But I guess the counter argument is that maybe I just haven't experienced much growth.
Right on. So you mentioned a little bit of the maybe impending political career that you have, but you also interned way back in the day. So is, one question I love asking people that work in politics, is it more like Veep or the West Wing?
That's great. It's funny. We were actually watching The West Wing all the way through again, my wife and I. So separately, we had watched it before we even knew each other, and we were like, "Hey, let's go ahead and watch this." So that's been a lot of fun. I have seen the first. I've seen enough of Veep to get it. I think. What is he? Is it in I Love You Man or Knocked Up? I think where Paul Rudd says to Seth Rogen that marriage is like a long, unfunny Everybody Loves Raymond. It's just really funny. It's kind of like you want it to be as funny as Veep, but maybe it's somewhere where it's trying to be as important as West Wing and as funny as West Wing, especially the first 4 seasons. But yeah, I think that it's a lot more mundane than that. That said, I never lost my amazement at seeing all those people around, all those members of Congress, all of those House members, the senators, the Department of Defense, Secretary of Defense rather, was there, and you just see them. And I remember I was sitting in a very big committee room. It was full, and Representative Steve Shabbat, my boss, was on the committee, and I was way on the other side of the room, Keith. And he looked at me and he went like this. He motioned for me to come over, and I looked at him, and he goes, and he gave me another one of those. He was a really nice guy, but he kind of gave it to me a little bit more effusively, like, get over here.
Yeah.
And I remember having to walk across all of these important people to go get a message from him to take to, I think it was the chief of staff. But you're so intimidated by that moment because you're like, does he really want me to walk across the room, or is there like a secret passage, or am I going to end up on C-SPAN? And that's kind of cool, but kind of not if they're in the middle of making a point and I'm going to get fired from a volunteer job. But there were little moments like that I remember of going, this is kind of mundane to most people, probably. Like if you were filming that, I don't think that's interesting to anybody. But I think telling it from my perspective, you go, oh, that is kind of weird. I don't know. I guess I would freeze up a little bit too to walk across this committee room with all these huge people in it.
These legendary figures. Did it turn you off to politics in any way, or make you appreciate what they're doing on a day-to-day basis?
It actually did make me appreciate what people were doing. I think what Steve Shabbat said, and I disagreed with most of his stances, and I didn't really realize that at the time. I just thought, you know what, I want to go to DC and party for 3 months, and it was very much that. So that did not disappoint. Super nice guy. I feel though, like after talking to him, or not though, and that he said he felt the vast majority of people at that time, now this is 1999, I don't think this is true anymore. In fact, it's not true anymore, which is people had good hearts. Like they went in with the right intention. They went in trying to help. And yes, there was ego, and yes, they'd get on TV and all that, but I think it was much more driven by, they really were trying to do what they felt was the right thing. And maybe we disagreed with how they got there. And those were kind of the good old days. Yeah.
His track record the last year or so has been a little interesting with the choices that he's made and the things he said. But I tend to agree with that too, right? I think that ideology was different, but you tried to get to a common consensus for the good of the people, and it's in a completely different area now, and it's I use the word wackadoo for it because that's the only way to describe what's happening right now in politics.
It is wackadoo, and there will be people who say, "Oh no, you're romanticizing the '90s and you're looking at it through rose-tinted glasses," and they're wrong. They are just straight up wrong. I mean, because it is a different world. There are things happening now that just didn't happen. There are things not happening now that just did happen. And I don't know how we put that genie back in the toothpaste tube, but it is fundamentally different. And anyone who says, no, it's always been like that, they have no idea what they're talking about.
Yes. And speaking of fundamentally different, this past year and a half of our lives, our collective lives, with COVID-19 and the pandemic continuing to, and more surging happening now. Again, a lot of people I talked to, their jobs were somewhat distributed already, right? They go to an office and they sit down and work and maybe do some board meetings, but working from a Zoom and working from a computer is not that different, except for the dynamic with their family and all that. You were performing in front of live audiences and your livelihood is based off of that interaction in a sometimes small, cramped, people coughing place. Give me some color on the last year of your life. And, A, have you gone back on stage? B, like, what did you do for that year to kind of supplement some of that, the natural endorphins that come with an audience like that?
It sucked at the beginning. I think for most people it did. I probably went through a very similar process that everyone else did. I might have drawn a couple of different conclusions, but probably what you're going to hear is fairly similar to what maybe a lot of people would say. They might just not articulate it as well. But what I would say is, in the beginning, it was really hard. One of the things that I think is interesting about any kind of online interaction is you cannot look each other in the eye.
Yeah.
So if I'm looking at the camera, I'm not looking at you. If I'm looking at you, I'm not
Yeah.
looking at you in the eye. It's actually physically impossible. According to current technology, it cannot be done. And we feed off of each other. We need that human interaction. Not only do we need the human touch, and that was widely written about, but we need that eye-to-eye contact. It's very feeding to a lot of us, and it's very draining to not get that. And on a Zoom call, even though you trained your body to not overly emote, especially with acting, you learn that the camera picks up everything. You can chill, be yourself. Bad acting is usually overacting. It's very rare that a person underacts a line. It can happen, but it's very rare. It's almost like farsightedness. It's just a rare condition in terms of being able to see far stuff. And I don't mean reading glasses, but you know what I'm talking about. Like just not being able to see what's right in front of you. Although I guess that's probably most people, the forest for the trees and that kind of thing. So it's this idea of giving of yourself and getting nothing in return. I mean, it is not feeding you at all. It's very draining. And the other conclusion I drew was, wow, maybe I don't need to perform on stage, which is a weird thing. I needed to write. I still wrote every day, but I would have thought that I needed to perform. I've never needed it the way other comedians do, where they need to get on stage every night and it's like crack for them. I think it's important. When I got back up at the Broadway Comedy Club in New York City at the end of May, it's like I walked up there and didn't miss a beat, but I also don't rust.
Yeah.
My success, such as it is based on the fact that I don't rust. I'm not saying I'm hilarious. I'm not saying I suck. I'm just the same.
Stay the same.
I stay the same. And everyone who came to see me that night just said that. They went, wow, you, and it wasn't my show. I was part of a lineup, but I had a few friends come in. The whole thing was very last minute. And they all said that. They're like, you seemed really comfortable. That did not seem like you hadn't done it in a year. And I was fed. I enjoyed doing it. I loved it, but it did make me think, wow, I might be fine not getting up in front of audiences. And that was a little bit scary to think about.
Yeah, because that's something that you've loved for 15 plus years. And to kind of understand that might not be something you need. but it's
kind of great, though.
Yeah.
It's great to not need it, to want it, right? Yeah. To just go, I don't need this ice cream. I want it. And I recognize that. Like, I don't need a Range Rover, a matte black Range Rover. Not that I put much thought into it, but I want it. And I think it's to be able to separate those things and go, that's good then, because some of the worst performances are too needy. Like you need too much from the audience. And you can go out there going, I'm going to give this to people. And I feel like those have been my best nights anyways, when I'm going out there to give laughs, not get them. I don't need this shit. But it's like, if this is going to make you happy, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to do it. And maybe that's a great realization.
That is a fantastic realization. Yeah. And so your writing would you say your writing picked up, or was it just stayed consistent? Were there other habits that you either picked up or dropped? I know for me personally, for some reason, reading novels and fiction just dropped off precipitously. It was something which was really weird because I have way more time, but it was for me the habit of going on the subway and reading 20 or 30 pages going to work. And I lost that. I would go from my office upstairs down to my living room. And there's not much time to read in between there. Were there habits like that you either picked up or you lost?
That's really interesting. I did actually reread Great Expectations. I got that in under the wire before we opened back up. And my wife even said that. She goes, oh, so just so you can say that you reread a Dickens novel, right? Just like right in there, right before the lockdown ends. I'm like, thanks for your cynical point of view, Hersha. But yes, I at least got that in. What did you read? And so it was that kind of thing. What habits changed? I mean, I drank more. That was not such a great thing. And I realized that I had never had a drink by myself in my life, ever. I never had a glass of wine with a book. I never had a beer after mowing the lawn. I never had a whiskey whenever you have a whiskey, which is my default, drink. But coming out of this pandemic, I had to rewrite the rules for myself and be like, okay, we're going back to this now. There's no more drinking alone. That was pandemic. It's over. And if you were going to drink by yourself, realize that is a massive change that is happening. And you cannot allow that to continue to happen unless you're going to do that consciously and you're going to be safe and all those kind of things. but I've always had a policy where I don't drink alone. I've gone back to not doing that. And I could absolutely see how people sink into alcoholism and sink into substance abuse, because I'm sure a lot of people have, and my heart goes out to them because it is not easy.
Yeah, there's the story of John Mulaney, who I think suffered through depression during the pandemic. And especially, and it sounds like you don't have this, but the people who their energy and their optimism comes from a live crowd, must have really suffered through this. And, you know, again, I'm pretty extroverted as well. I love a big meeting, right? I always love that joke in 30 Rock where Jack Donaghy was like cover boy for Meetings Monthly. I was like, yeah, I'm Meetings Monthly too. I'm on that.
Yeah.
So that energy is hard to replace, and that's been something that's been hard to find over Zooms. One of the things that I have enjoyed though is the time with the family. I think that sounds tropey and hokey, but the ability I have a 5-year-old, and the ability to see her every single day. And see my wife every single day and not be on the road and not travel has been really good. Has there been a deeper connection with your wife, or has it been 2 separate rooms? Hash it out.
It's a deeper connection, I think, for sure. I think it's going to go. I mean, I guess it could flatline, but probably most people's relationships went one way or the other.
Yeah.
And I think that we had to. I think it was important to consciously discuss that about how in this modern world, people are not built to spend this kind of time together. And Chris Rock covered this in Tambourine, his special, where he said, you know, his dad was with his mom. His parents were together a long time, but those years were not like these years. My dad got up in the morning, he went to work, and he did not come home. One of us could be dead for 8 hours, and he would not know because there was no cell phones. There was no internet. He'd walk back through the house at 6, 7 o'clock, the front door of the house at 6, 7 o'clock, and he was gone. This fool was out for 12 hours because I leave for work, and 10 minutes later, I'm getting a text from my wife. How come you haven't liked my Facebook post yet? How come you haven't liked my Instagram? It's like, bitch, I just talked to you 5 minutes ago. You know, and it's great. Of course, he does it a lot funnier, even though I'm a comic doing Chris Rock. You can't do Chris Rock the way Chris Rock can do Chris Rock. So this whole idea of just going, you know, it's not natural in this day and age. And even forget this day and age. You think in the agricultural people were just sitting around talking. No, they're out in the fields. They were doing stuff. The industrial era, all hunter-gatherers. Humans don't do this. They don't just sit around and do nothing. That's not a thing that we collectively do. And that is not good for relationships unless you consciously go, we are going to make this a good thing. But I think that you have to keep that. I think your natural tendency would be to sink. And you've got to put measures in place so that you float and preferably swim.
Yeah, it's so true. I remember the early days of the pandemic and how hard it was because I just, the joke that my wife and I would always say is like, I would be like, oh, did I tell you? Yeah, I told you that already. Okay. We lost all stories. You know, I think it was like 2 weeks in, every life story had been told and been shared. And now you're just on, what's it like upstairs? And you're like, oh, upstairs is, you know, it's great upstairs. Like there's nothing else to go on that. So I'm glad you made it through this. And then I'm glad it sounds like you guys are even stronger. I want to go a little bit back to the comedy stuff and a little bit, I'd love to learn who your people were, right? Like who are the people that you grew up with that you were inspired by? And then, you know, who are some of the people that you've grown to love now that they're peers, now that they're folks that you've worked with? Because that might be a different set.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I was always more, and this is going to sound pretentious, and I know that it is, but it was always people who could bend the English language in a certain way that weren't even comedians. So like whether it was Mahatma Gandhi or Abraham Lincoln or any of these people, Mark Twain, who you were like, wow, that's really funny on the written page.
Yeah.
And so just being impressed by, oh, that's so, I see what you did there kind of thing, or Winston Churchill's quotes or FDR's quotes, and just seeing how people were able to just make an idea leap to life off the page was really, really interesting to me. And those were my influences. And the people in my life were my influences. My brothers who were so funny, my friend that I mentioned, John Sandy and John Langdon, and all these people who just made me laugh in my real life were probably my influences even more than the 5 comedians that I'd seen before I performed. And I had seen or listened to Bill Cosby, rest in peace, I guess. Also, I had listened to Bill Cosby himself, Stephen Wright, I Have a Pony, Dennis Leary, No Cure for Cancer, Dennis Miller, The Off-White Album. And I think it was, well, certainly Jerry Seinfeld, all of his bits that he did before his show Seinfeld. So, and even those I didn't get into, I didn't get into Seinfeld until late. So that was maybe right before I got up on stage. I may be missing one, but I think those are all the people that I had listened to or seen. And so that's a pretty diverse set.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can see a lot of my comedy in any of those people. They're very different.
Yeah. I would say somewhat literary, all of them too, right? I think the way that they put their delivery together, so that maybe that's the thread there. So you met Seinfeld, correct?
Yeah, I got to meet Jerry Seinfeld. We were on the same show in New York City at Gotham Comedy Club, and that was a mind-blowing experience, just being able to at least talk to him for a couple minutes and tell him, hey, I've been doing transcendental meditation, and even though I'm Indian, it's funny that I saw your video online, and that's what got me into it. And that he laughed. He said, "Is it working for you?" I said, "Yeah, it's been awesome. I've been doing it every day and haven't missed a day in years, and it's been part of my process." So I thought that was really, really cool. But now the people, I think my personal Mount Rushmore. I know you're not supposed to say Louis C.K. anymore, but I'd say Louis C.K., Bill Burr, Chris Rock, and Dave Chappelle.
Yeah,
and those are the four that are in that Venn diagram of successful, hilarious, and actually saying something. And I think there are probably those four, and maybe a couple other people who are like that.
Yeah, I'm excited that Bill Burr is kind of getting a little bit more. There's a little bit of he's getting on these shows. I mean, was he on the Mandalorian? Was that the show that he was?
I think so. I know that he was on Breaking Bad.
He was on Breaking Bad.
Of the other ones.
But he's somebody that I think accidentally I saw close to a dozen times, just going to comedy shows and then being like, yes, Bill Burr is here. And so he's one of my favorites as well. Are there underrated? Because that's the Mount Rushmore, right? Are there some that you go, these guys and girls deserve way more attention. They deserve their show. They deserve the flowers, as the kids say, that maybe many of us just haven't heard of or haven't seen.
I think he is getting his due, and he has been. But I think Bo Burnham is a genius. I think.
Oh man,
Burnham,
that special was
inside the special. Yes, was. Yeah. I think he is arguably one of the top 5 creative minds of the millennium in any field. I think for him to put that together, and his other specials are extremely good as well. And I've seen him once live at the Hollywood Improv. I didn't talk to him, but he's a loner. He was kind of by himself, and I didn't really want to bother him. But that was way before he's as big as he is now. But I kind of feel like it's impossible to overrate him. I think that he is that good. There are a lot of people of color who may not be getting, and women who may not be getting as much love mainstream, but they're getting a lot of love in the streaming services, and especially on Instagram and places like that, where you get a lot of, a lot of other influencers and a lot of other comedians and a lot of people who matter are big upping a lot of the folks in the game. So, you're seeing that more and more, almost to the point where there's so many that I don't know that there's someone I could name without leaving people out. But I don't know. I think that there are people getting their due. But if you look at someone even like Brian Regan, who's been in the game so long, he should absolutely be a household name, and he's not. And he's Seinfeld without the show Seinfeld. I mean, he's almost like Jerry after Seinfeld, if we're going to make a play on the words of Jerry before Seinfeld on Netflix. But I think there are people like that who grind, who have been in the comedy clubs a long time and never really make it to TV. And there's a lot of them out there. If you just go to your local comedy club and watch the comics, especially the headliners, but even a lot of the features, and sometimes even the hosts, you're going, man, how is this person not a household name? And they're hilarious. Yeah.
I mean, that just shows the competitive nature and also some of the luck that comes into it of who gets these shows and gets these chances versus who's going to continue to go out there day in, day out and hit the comedy clubs. Mm-hmm. So we'll wrap up here with what's next for you. What does the next year look like? You've been holed up. What are you excited about for the next year?
Professionally, I think the biggest thing is I have a show called What Do You Bring to the Table? Yeah. And you can look it up at watchrajiv.com, and it redirects you where you need to go. I had released season 1, and initially it was funded by a Kickstarter that was funded in one day, actually, and then doubled 2x its amount, which was super cool and one of the greatest days of my life, just to be able to get to about 4:00 that day and my wife going, let's go to dinner. You're going to make it. And, because she knew how worried I was and all that. And she's like, your hard work really paid off. And I really know how to run a Kickstarter now. If anyone needs that kind of advice, I'm happy to maybe charge for it. Who knows? I need the money, but especially during the pandemic. That said, I think, having season 1 of that, now we finally started, shooting season 2. We're going to release season 2 in the fall, 2021. I think we're really excited about that because in season 1, we started with South Asians and we're continuing with that right now, but we're going to make the pivot. It's celebrating immigration of people who are first, second, or third generation, but it doesn't matter. Long term, it's going to be, South Asians, East Asians, European Americans, Jewish people, Middle Easterners, African Americans, anybody, it doesn't matter. The whole idea is that your experience should be informed by immigration in some way, shape, or form. So either you are an immigrant, your parents are, your grandparents are.
Very
and the
cool.
reason we cut it off there is that's your experience. I think once you get to the great-grandparents, I don't know how much they were in your life and shaping your world. If you're really lucky and have a lot of longevity, maybe.
For sure.
I think that's the idea, is to celebrate that. What I think truly makes this country great is immigration, right? We're all immigrants. We all came from someplace. And I think celebrating that at a time where I feel like it really should be
Absolutely.
is important to me. So what do you bring to the table? Season 2 out in the fall, and we're shooting them, we're releasing them, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Awesome, man. Raj, it was great connecting with you. This is a really fun conversation. Thank you so much for sharing, and congratulations on all the success.
I wrote down a couple of notes based on this, things that you made me realize during this time, Keith, and that rarely happens during an interview. So kudos to you for asking insightful questions. It doesn't happen every day. So thanks for having me on.
Oh, thank you so much, man. This was a lot of fun. Thank you.